I sacrificed my 30s, my career, and my dignity to be a savior for a man who only saw me as a servant. And after I nursed his sick mom for 5 years, he left me the day she died. There was no mourning period, no tearful embrace where we comforted each other over the loss of the matriarch. There was just the cold, flat hum of the EKG machine, the smell of stale lavender and decay, and a man checking his watch like he was late for a lunch reservation. He didn't look at his dead mother. He looked at me, his eyes devoid of the love he had faked for half a decade, and uttered 5 words that shattered my reality. You can pack your bags. In that moment, I realized I hadn't been a girlfriend or a fiancé waiting in the wings. I had been a placeholder, a free hospice nurse, a disposable resource that had finally run out of use. Now, before I tell you how I picked myself up from the curb and made him regret the day he ever learned my name, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and like this video. If you have ever given everything to someone who gave you nothing but a headache in return, you are home. Let's talk about it. My name is Alana, and 5 years ago, I was vibrant. I was 32, a head nurse at a bustling downtown hospital, and I had a life that belonged to me. I had brunch dates on Sundays, a savings account that was growing, and a laugh that came easily. Then I met Caleb. He was the kind of man who felt like a deep breath after holding it for too long. He was a software engineer with a gentle smile and a way of listening that made you feel like the only person in the room. We met at a coffee shop. Cliché, I know. But when he spilled his latte on my scrubs and insisted on paying for my dry cleaning, I was charmed. We dated for 6 months, and it was a whirlwind. He was attentive, romantic, and seemingly vulnerable. He talked about a future together, about building a home, about travel. He painted a picture of a life that looked like a dream. Then, the dream hit a wall. Her name was Dolores. Caleb's mother had been battling early-onset dementia and aggressive Parkinson's for years, but her condition took a nosedive 6 months into our relationship. I remember the night Caleb came to my apartment, tears streaming down his face. He sat on my couch, head in his hands, looking like a broken little boy. "The facility is raising their rates again, Alana," he sobbed. "I can't afford it. They're going to kick her out. I don't know what to do. I can't put her in a state home. It would kill her. She needs 24-hour care, and private nurses cost a fortune." My heart broke for him. Being a nurse, I knew exactly how cruel the system could be. I knew the difference between a high-end care facility and the warehouses where they parked the elderly to fade away. I stroked his hair, telling him we would figure it out. "I wish I could just bring her home," he whispered, looking up at me with those big, soulful brown eyes. "But I don't know how to take care of her. I'm scared I'd hurt her. If only, if only I had someone who knew what they were doing." It was a trap. I see that now. It was a perfectly laid trap, baited with pity and flattery. But back then, I saw a man who loved his mother. I saw a crisis I could solve. "I can help," I said. 3 words that signed away the next 5 years of my life. We moved into Dolores's house a month later. It was a sprawling, dusty Victorian thing on the edge of town, filled with antique furniture that smelled of mothballs and a silence that felt heavy. The deal was simple. I would move in to help care for Dolores, and since I wouldn't be paying rent, we could save money for our future house. Caleb promised it was temporary, just until she stabilized or until his startup took off and he could afford professional help. "We're a team, babe," he told me, kissing my forehead as I unpacked my boxes in the guest room because Dolores's room was next to the master and she needed privacy. "Once we get through this, the world is ours." I quit my job at the hospital. Caleb insisted. "You can't work a 12-hour shift and then come home to this," he argued. "It's too much. I'll cover the bills. You just focus on mom." It sounded like he was taking care of me. In reality, he was isolating me. The first year was hard, but manageable. Dolores was difficult. She was a woman who had been bitter long before she got sick, but she was lucid enough to be grateful occasionally. I managed her meds, bathed her, cooked her meals, and kept the house clean. Caleb was appreciative. He'd bring me flowers on Fridays. He'd rub my shoulders after I spent an hour lifting Dolores in and out of the bath. But as the disease progressed, the dynamic shifted. Dolores became a tyrant. The dementia stripped away her filter, leaving a nasty, racist, demanding core exposed. She would scream at me if the oatmeal was too hot. She would throw her soiled diapers at me if I didn't change her fast enough. She called me the help and accused me of stealing her jewelry. Jewelry that Caleb had actually pawned months ago to pay the electric bill, or so he said. I was working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I slept with a baby monitor on my nightstand. I woke up every 2 hours to turn her so she wouldn't get bed sores. I learned to eat standing up in the kitchen because if I sat down, she would ring the bell she kept by her bed. Ding, ding, ding. That sound still haunts my nightmares. And Caleb? Caleb started to disappear. At first, it was subtle. He had late meetings, then business trips. He stopped bringing flowers. He stopped asking how my day was. When I tried to talk to him about how exhausted I was, about how my back was spasming from lifting a woman twice my weight, he would sigh loud and long. Alana, please, he'd say, not looking up from his phone. I'm working my ass off to keep the lights on. I deal with stress all day. I don't want to come home and hear complaints. You're at home all day. How hard can it be? How hard can it be? I wanted to scream. I wanted to drag him into that room and make him wipe his mother's backside. I wanted him to see the bruises on my arms where she pinched me. But I didn't. I swallowed it because I had invested too much. This is the sunk cost fallacy in human form. I had given up my apartment, my job, and my friends. If I left now, it was all for nothing. I had to see it through. I had to get to the future he promised. By year 3, I was a ghost. I had lost weight. My hair was always in a messy bun because I didn't have time to wash it. I wore sweatpants exclusively. I didn't see my friends anymore because I was embarrassed by how tired I looked and because Caleb told me they didn't understand our sacrifice. They're just jealous of what we're building, he'd say. Focus on the prize, babe. When mom passes, we're selling this place. The land alone is worth $1 million. We're going to move to Italy. Just you and me. No bells, no diapers, just wine and sunsets. That lie was the only fuel I had left. The end came slowly, then all at once. Year 5. Dolores was bedridden, nonverbal, and fading. The house smelled permanently of sickness. I was running on autopilot, a hollow shell of a woman moving from task to task. Caleb was barely home. He said he was launching a new app, that crunch time was essential. He slept in the guest room down the hall because the oxygen machine is too loud. We hadn't been intimate in over a year. I told myself it was the stress. I told myself it was the grief of the impending loss. On a rainy Tuesday in November, Dolores's breathing changed. It was the death rattle, a sound every nurse knows. I called Caleb. It's time, I said. Come home. He arrived an hour later. He didn't rush to her side. He walked into the kitchen, made himself a sandwich, and then slowly walked into the bedroom. I was sitting by her bed, holding her hand, stroking her thin, papery skin. Even after everything she put me through, she was a human being, and I wasn't going to let her die alone. Caleb stood at the foot of the bed, hands in his pockets. He looked bored. How long? He asked. Soon, I whispered. Her pulse is thready. We waited for 2 hours. I talked to her softly, telling her it was okay to let go. Caleb scrolled on his phone. At 4:12 p.m., Dolores took her last breath. The room went silent. The heavy struggle of the last 5 years evaporated into the air. I checked for a pulse. Nothing. She's gone, I said, tears pricking my eyes. Tears of exhaustion, relief, and a strange, complicated grief. I stood up, my knees cracking, and turned to Caleb. I expected a hug. I expected him to collapse into me. I expected the beginning of us. Caleb nodded. He put his phone in his pocket. He didn't look at his mother. He looked at me. Okay, he said. Call the coroner. I will, I said, reaching for him. Caleb, I'm so sorry. I know how much you loved her. He stepped back, dodging my touch. Yeah, well, he said, she had a good run, thanks to you. We did it, I said, a desperate hope rising in my chest. We got her through it. It's over, babe. We can finally breathe. Caleb looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. It was cold, calculating. It was the look of a man who had finished a project and was discarding the leftover materials. Alana, he said, his voice flat, we need to talk. Now? I asked. Caleb, she's still warm. Can we just... Now, he interrupted. Look, I really appreciate everything you've done. You were great with her. Really great. I couldn't have done it without you. What are you saying? I asked, a cold pit forming in my stomach. I'm saying the arrangement is over, he said. Mom is gone. The house is going on the market next week. I've already got a realtor lined up. Okay, I stammered. So we're moving to Italy like we planned? Caleb laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. Italy? Alana, come on. Come on, be realistic. That was fantasy talk. To keep morale up, the room started to spin. Fantasy talk? Caleb, I gave up 5 years of my life. I wiped your mother's ass. I haven't earned a paycheck in half a decade because you told me this was our investment. And you lived here rent free, he countered, his voice hardening. You had food, shelter, and utilities paid for. It was a job, Alana, a live-in gig, and the job is done. A job? I screamed, my voice cracking. I was your girlfriend. You told me you loved me. I cared about you, he shrugged. But let's be honest, we drifted apart years ago. I've just been waiting until Mom passed. I didn't want to disrupt her care. You were good for her. But us? We're done. I've actually been seeing someone else for about 8 months. She's not a nurse. The air left my lungs. He had used me. He had kept me around solely because I was cheaper than a nursing home and more devoted than a hire. He had cheated on me while I was in the next room cleaning his mother's vomit. You can't do this, I whispered. I have nowhere to go. I have no money. You promised me. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out an envelope. He tossed it onto the dead woman's bed right next to her cooling hand. There's $5,000 in there, he said. Severance. That should get you a deposit on an apartment somewhere. You have an hour to pack your stuff. I have people coming over to stage the house tonight. An hour? I stared at him. Caleb, we lived together for 5 years. And now we don't, he said, checking his watch again. Look, don't make this ugly. You're a good nurse. You'll find work. Just take the money and go, please. He turned and walked out of the room. He walked out on me, and he walked out on his dead mother. I stood there, frozen. The silence of the room was deafening. I looked at Dolores. Her face was finally peaceful, smoothed of all the anger and pain. I looked at the envelope of cash sitting next to her lifeless hand. $5,000. That was the price of my youth. That was the price of my love. $1,000 a year. I felt a scream building in my chest, a primal, violent thing. But I swallowed it. I didn't scream. I didn't chase him. I walked over to the bed and picked up the envelope. I looked at Dolores one last time. He's a monster, isn't he? I whispered to the corpse. You tried to warn me. In your own twisted way, you hated him too. I turned to leave the room, to go pack my meager belongings into trash bags, when my eye caught something. On the nightstand, amidst the pill bottles and tissues, was Dolores's old, battered iPad. She used it to play solitaire when she was lucid. Caleb never touched it. He thought it was garbage. But I knew something he didn't. I knew that in the last 6 months, when Dolores lost her speech, she didn't lose her hearing. And she didn't lose her spite. I remembered a rainy afternoon 3 weeks ago. Caleb had been in the hallway, arguing on the phone with his mystery woman, laughing about how close he was to payday. He thought Dolores was asleep. He thought I was in the laundry room. But I was in the closet, folding towels. And Dolores? Dolores was awake. And she was tapping on that iPad. I picked it up. The screen was smudged. I pressed the home button. It wasn't on solitaire. It was on the voice memo app. There was a new recording, dated 3 weeks ago. It was labeled simply, "For the nurse." My hands trembled. I looked at the door. Caleb was downstairs, probably popping a bottle of champagne. I pressed play. Dolores's voice was weak, raspy, struggling for every syllable. But it was intelligible. He thinks I'm stupid, the recording hissed. He thinks he takes everything, the house, the money. He waits for me to die. He cheats on you. There was a long pause of ragged breathing. You are a fool, Alana. But you cleaned me. You fed me. He did nothing. Another pause. The will in the safe is fake. He forged it last year. I saw him, Will isn't in the house. It's with Father Marcus. At the church. Go to Father Marcus. Tell him the witch is dead. The recording clicked off. I stood there, clutching the iPad to my chest, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. A fake will, a secret priest, and a spiteful old woman who decided to launch one last grenade from beyond the grave. Caleb thought he had discarded me. He thought he had won. He thought I was leaving with $5,000 and a broken heart. I wiped the tears from my face. I looked at my reflection in the dark window. I looked tired. I looked worn out. But for the first time in 5 years, I didn't look hopeless. I shoved the iPad into my bag. I grabbed the envelope of cash. You want me to leave, Caleb? I whispered to the empty room. Oh, I'll leave, but I'm taking your future with me. I didn't pack my clothes. I didn't pack my shoes. I walked out of that room with nothing but the clothes on my back and the bomb in my purse. I walked down the stairs. Caleb was in the kitchen, on the phone. Yeah, baby, it's done, he was saying, a smile in his voice. She's gone, both of them. He looked up as I walked to the front door. Leaving already? He smirked. Good girl. I stopped. I turned to him. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I smiled. It was the coldest, sharpest smile I had ever worn. Goodbye, Caleb, I said. Good luck with the house. I walked out into the rain. I had no car. He had sold it 2 years ago to save on insurance. I had to walk. But I didn't care. I wasn't walking to a shelter. I was walking to a church. And God helped Caleb when I got there. The rain was a cold, relentless sheet that soaked through my thin sweater in seconds, plastering my hair to my skull and chilling me to the bone. But I didn't feel the cold. I felt a furnace burning in my chest, a fire fueled by 5 years of swallowed insults, unpaid labor, and the image of Caleb's smirk as he tossed that envelope onto his dead mother's bed. He thought he had thrown out the trash. He didn't realize he had just released a wolf from its cage. I walked down the long, winding driveway of the estate, my cheap sneakers squelching in the mud, clutching my purse like it contained the nuclear launch codes, because in a way, it did. Dolores's iPad was heavy against my hip, a digital tombstone that was about to crush Caleb's entire world. I didn't have a car, and the nearest bus stop was 3 miles away. I walked until I reached the main road, the headlights of passing cars blinding me, splashing dirty water onto my legs. I was a sight, a soaking wet woman in stained sweatpants walking on the shoulder of a highway at dusk. Finally, I ducked under the awning of a closed gas station and used a portion of my severance, a crisp $100 bill Caleb had so graciously thrown at me, to bribe a confused Uber driver into taking me across town to St. Jude's Parish. You okay, miss? The driver asked, eyeing me in the rearview mirror as I dripped onto his upholstery. You look like you've been through it. I'm fine, I said, my voice sounding rough and foreign to my own ears. I'm just going to church. St. Jude's was an imposing stone structure in the older part of the city, a relic from a time when guilt and grandeur went hand in hand. It was the church Dolores had attended religiously before she got sick, dragging a reluctant Caleb along until he was old enough to refuse. I paid the driver and stood before the heavy wooden doors. It was locked. Of course it was locked. It was Tuesday evening. But I wasn't leaving. I pounded on the wood, the sound dull and heavy against the roar of the rain. Father Marcus, I yelled. Father Marcus, please. I banged until my fists ached. Just as I was about to look for a rock to smash a window, a smaller side door creaked open. An older man with thinning gray hair and a cardigan over his clerical collar peered out. He looked annoyed, squinting into the gloom. The soup kitchen is closed until tomorrow, he grumbled, and we don't keep cash on the premises. I'm not here for soup, I said, stepping into the light. I'm here for Dolores. Father Marcus froze. He squinted harder. Alana, is that you? My heavens, child, look at you. You look like a drowned rat. Dolores passed away 3 hours ago, I said, cutting straight to the chase. His expression softened, shifting from annoyance to a practiced priestly sorrow. He crossed himself instinctively. Rest her soul. It was a long time coming. I assume Caleb sent you to arrange the service? Caleb sent me to the street, I said, stepping past him into the dry warmth of the vestibule. He kicked me out before the body was cold. He's selling the house. He says there's a will that leaves everything to him. Father Marcus stiffened. The air in the hallway seemed to change, charged with a sudden tension. He closed the door, locking out the rain. He looked at me, really looked at me, searching my face for something. And what do you say? He asked carefully. I reached into my bag and pulled out the iPad. I didn't play the recording. I just repeated the words Dolores had rasped into the microphone. She told me to tell you, the witch is dead. A slow, knowing smile spread across the old priest's face. It wasn't a smile of joy. It was the smile of a conspirator. He let out a short chuckle that echoed in the quiet hallway. She always did have a flair for the dramatic, he murmured. Come with me. He led me through the dark nave of the church, past the flickering votive candles, and into a small, cluttered office in the back. He moved a stack of hymnals off a chair for me, and then walked over to a heavy wall safe hidden behind a tapestry of the Last Supper. Dolores came to me about a year ago, Father Marcus said, spinning the dial. She had a moment of clarity. She had her lawyer meet us here in secret. She said Caleb had been bringing her papers to sign, telling her they were medical forms. But she saw the word power of attorney and quitclaim. She knew. Clunk. The safe opened. He pulled out a thick, sealed envelope. It was cream-colored linen paper, heavy and official. On the front, in Dolores' shaky handwriting, it read, Last Will and Testament of Dolores J. Halloway, to be opened only upon my death and the utterance of the passphrase. Caleb has a forgery, Father Marcus said, handing me the envelope. A very good one, I'm sure. He probably traced her signature or guided her hand when she was medicated. But this is notarized, video witnessed, and filed with a firm that Caleb doesn't know exists. My hands shook as I broke the wax seal. I pulled out the document. It was dense with legalese, but Father Marcus pointed to the third page. Read that, he said. I read aloud, my voice trembling. I, Dolores Halloway, being of sound mind and spiteful disposition, hereby revoke all former wills and codicils regarding my son, Caleb Halloway. I paused, my breath catching. To Caleb, I leave the sum of $1, which is exactly the value he placed on my life. I leave him my disappointment, which he has earned in abundance. He is to receive no property, no assets, and no insurance payouts. Furthermore, if he contests this will, the entirety of the estate will be liquidated and donated to the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, specifically to a fund for neutering stray dogs, a fate I find fitting. I gasped. It was brutal. It was pure Dolores. And the rest? I asked. Keep reading, Father Marcus said gently. To Alana Vance, the woman who wiped my brow while my son checked his watch, I leave the entirety of my estate. This includes the property at 424 Oak Lane, the savings accounts at Chase Bank, and the contents of my safety deposit box. This bequest is not a gift of love. I do not love easily, but a payment of debt. She did the work. She gets the wage. My son wanted me dead to get my money. Alana kept me alive despite it. The house is hers. The money is hers. May she use it to buy a life far away from that parasite. I dropped the paper. It fluttered to the floor like a feather. Everything. The house, the accounts, the land Caleb said was worth $1 million. It was all mine. I wasn't destitute. I wasn't homeless. I was a millionaire. I don't understand, I whispered, tears finally spilling over. She was so mean to me. She threw soup at me. She called me names. She was sick, Alana, Father Marcus said, picking up the will and placing it back in the envelope. And she was angry at her body, angry at her mind, and furious at her son. You were the only safe target she had. But deep down in the parts of her brain that still worked, she saw you. She saw the sacrifice. He handed the envelope back to me. This is yours now. But you need to move fast. If Caleb sells that house or drains the accounts before you file this, it will be a nightmare to get back. Possession is 9/10 of the law, and right now, he possesses everything. He said he was listing the house next week, I said, panic rising again. He has people staging it tonight. Then you need a lawyer, Father Marcus said. A shark, not a nice one. I looked at the envelope of cash Caleb had given me. $5,000. I can afford a shark, I said, a steely resolve hardening in my chest. Do you know one? I know a woman who comes to Mass here, Father Marcus said, scribbling a name on a piece of paper. Samantha Steele. She specializes in probate litigation. She's aggressive. Tell her I sent you and show her this. I took the paper, Samantha Steele. The name sounded like a weapon. Thank you, Father, I said, standing up. Go with God, Alana, he said. And maybe go get a shower. You look like you're ready to haunt a house. I walked out of the church, but I didn't step back into the rain as a victim. I stepped out as an heiress with a vendetta. I checked into a Motel 6 down the street. It was dingy and smelled of stale smoke, but it had a hot shower. I stood under the water for 45 minutes, scrubbing the smell of sickness and despair off my skin. I watched the gray water swirl down the drain, and with it went the meek, tired nurse who had begged for crumbs of affection. I stepped out, wrapped myself in a scratchy towel, and called Samantha Steele. It was 8 p.m. She answered on the second ring. Steele Law, a sharp voice barked. My name is Alana Vance, I said. I have a video witnessed will that disinherits a man who is currently trying to liquidate the estate. I have $5,000 cash for a retainer, and I want to destroy him. There was a pause on the line. Then, a sound I liked very much, the sound of a pen clicking open. "I'm listening," Samantha said. We met an hour later at a 24-hour diner. Samantha Steele lived up to her name. She was razor thin, wore a sharp blazer even at night, and had eyes that assessed my value in seconds. I handed her the will and the iPad. She read it while eating a plate of fries with a fork. "This is ironclad," she said, wiping her mouth. "The spite clause regarding the stray dogs is a nice touch. Judges hate disinheritance usually, but with the video evidence of his neglect versus your care, and the fraudulent will he's likely trying to file, we're gonna bury him." "He's moving fast," I said. "He thinks I'm gone. He thinks I'm halfway to a homeless shelter." "Good," Samantha smiled. "Let him think that. Let him dig the hole a little deeper. We need to catch him in the act of fraud. Has he filed for probate yet?" "He just died today. He can't have." "He might try to move assets before probate," Samantha mused. "Jewelry, cash, the car. We need to file an emergency injunction to freeze the estate. I can have a judge sign it by morning. But we need to serve him." "I want to do it," I said. Samantha looked at me. "Usually we use a process server. It's safer." "He stole 5 years of my life," I said, leaning over the table. "He made me think I was crazy for wanting basic human decency. I want to see his face when he realizes he's the help." Samantha grinned. "I like you, Alana. Okay, here is the plan. We file at 8 a.m. The injunction goes into effect immediately. The funeral is usually 3 days out, right? But knowing a guy like this, he'll try to do a quick cremation and a memorial to save money. He's holding a staging tonight," I remembered, "to sell the house." "Illegal," Samantha said. "He doesn't have the title yet. He's trying to get cash under the table or line up a buyer to flip it. The second probate clears." "Okay." "We let him play house for one more day. Let him feel comfortable. When is the funeral?" I checked Caleb's Facebook on my phone. He had posted a status update an hour ago. "Heartbroken to announce the passing of my beloved mother, Dolores. She went peacefully in my arms. A celebration of life will be held this Thursday at 2 p.m. at the estate. In lieu of flowers, please consider donating to my startup fund, as Mom would have wanted me to follow my dreams." I nearly threw up on the table. In his arms, he was eating a sandwich in the kitchen. "Donate to his startup?" "Thursday," I said, showing Samantha the phone. "At the house. He's turning the funeral into a networking event." "Perfect," Samantha said. "We'll crash it. You get some rest. Buy a nice dress, black, expensive looking. Meet me at my office at noon tomorrow. We're going to prepare the paperwork. By Thursday, you're going to own the floor he's standing on." The next 2 days were a blur of transformation. I took the remaining cash and went to a department store. I didn't buy the sensible scrubs or comfortable shoes I had worn for 5 years. I bought a sleek black sheath dress that fit like a glove. I bought high heels that clicked with authority. I got my hair cut and blown out, the gray strands dyed back to a rich chocolate brown. I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize myself. The tired nurse was gone. The woman staring back was dangerous. Thursday arrived. The rain had cleared, leaving a crisp, cold autumn day. Samantha picked me up in her silver Lexus. She handed me a manila envelope. "These are copies of the injunction, the real will, and a notice to vacate," she said. "The sheriff is meeting us there to enforce the peace, but he agreed to let you have the first word." We pulled up to the house, my house. The driveway was full of cars. Caleb had clearly invited everyone he wanted to impress. There was a catering van, not one he paid for, I bet, probably a tasting he scammed. I saw Caleb standing on the front porch, holding a glass of wine. He was wearing a suit I had ironed for him 100 times. He was laughing with a blonde woman who had her hand on his arm. The mystery woman, no doubt. My heart hammered, not with fear, but with adrenaline. "Ready?" Samantha asked. "More than ready," I said. I opened the car door and stepped out. The click of my heels on the pavement was the only sound I heard. Caleb looked up. He squinted, not recognizing me at first. Then as I got closer, his smile faltered. His eyes widened. The blonde woman followed his gaze. The chatter on the porch died down. "Alana?" Caleb said, his voice a mixture of confusion and annoyance. "What are you doing here? I told you to leave." I didn't stop walking until I was at the bottom of the steps, looking up at him. I did leave, Caleb, I said, my voice projecting clearly to the silent crowd. I went to get something you forgot. This is a private memorial, he hissed, stepping down to block me. You're making a scene. You look different. What did you do? Spend your severance on a makeover? It's pathetic. Go away. I didn't spend the severance on a makeover, I said, pulling the envelope from Samantha's hand. I spent it on a lawyer. Caleb laughed, a nervous, jerky sound. A lawyer for what? Unpaid wages? Good luck. We had no contract. Oh, it's not about wages, I said, stepping up one step, forcing him to back up. It's about the will. The will is done, he snapped. I'm the sole heir. The will you have is a forgery, I said. The crowd gasped. Caleb's face went white. You're crazy, he stammered. Mom was sick. She didn't know what she was doing. She knew exactly what she was doing, I said. She knew you were waiting for her to die. She knew you were cheating on me. And she knew that the only person in this world who actually gave a damn about her was the woman you treated like a slave. I reached the top of the stairs. I was eye to level with him now. This is an emergency injunction, I said, slapping the papers against his chest. Freezing all assets, and this, I held up the copy of the real will, is the document that gives me everything. That's a lie, Caleb screamed, grabbing the papers. Mom hated you. She hated you more, I said coldly. Read it, Caleb. Read the part about the stray dogs. He ripped the envelope open, his hands shaking so badly he tore the paper. He scanned the document. His knees actually buckled. He had to grab the porch railing to stay upright. No, he whispered. No, this can't be real. She couldn't. She did, I said. And there's one more thing. I pulled the notice to vacate from the stack. This is my house now, I said, and you are trespassing. The blonde woman took a step away from him. The guests began to murmur. You have 30 minutes to gather your personal effects, I said, checking my watch. A gesture I learned from him. Anything left after that belongs to the estate, which means it belongs to me. Caleb looked up at me, his eyes wild with panic. Alana, wait. Baby, please. We can talk about this. You can't just throw me out. This is my home. No, I said, leaning in close so only he could hear the ice in my voice. This was your mother's home. Now it's mine. You were just a guest who overstayed his welcome by 32 years. I turned to the sheriff who had just walked up the driveway. Officer, I said, I'd like to report a trespasser. I watched the color drain from Caleb's face, a slow, satisfying fade from arrogant flush to sickly pale, as the reality of my words settled over him like a shroud. I had nursed his sick mom for 5 years, and he left me the day she died, thinking I was nothing more than a discarded appliance. But as I stood on the porch of the house he claimed was his, surrounded by the wreckage of his social climbing, he realized that the appliance had just unplugged his entire life. The silence on the porch was absolute, broken only by the rustle of the legal papers in his trembling hands and the distant caw of a crow, as if even nature was mocking him. If you are just joining the revolution, welcome. Grab a seat and hit that subscribe button because we are about to dismantle a narcissist, piece by piece. This is ridiculous, Caleb finally sputtered, his voice cracking an octave higher than usual. He turned to the crowd, spreading his arms in a gesture of persecuted innocence. Everyone, please, this is my ex-girlfriend. She's distraught. She's having a breakdown. Clearly the grief has unhinged her. He reached out to touch the arm of the blonde woman standing next to him, the mystery woman he had been cheating on me with. Jessica, baby, ignore this. I'll handle it. Just go inside and grab another drink. Jessica didn't move. She was staring at the notice to vacate in Caleb's hand, her eyes darting over the bold legal text. She was young, maybe 25, dressed in a romper that cost more than my car, and she didn't look like the type of woman who stuck around for complicated. Caleb, she said, her voice sharp. You said you owned the house free and clear. You said the title was in your name. I do. I will, Caleb pleaded, sweat beading on his upper lip. It's a probate formality. This paper is it's a tactic. She's trying to extort me. It's a court order, Samantha Steele cut in, stepping forward. Her blazer looked like armor, her smile like a blade. And it's signed by Judge Halloway. No relation, just a happy coincidence of justice. Mr. Halloway, you are currently occupying this property illegally. You have attempted to liquidate assets that are frozen, And frankly, this party is unauthorized. Samantha turned to the sheriff. Sheriff Miller, if you would? The sheriff, a man who looked like he had been carved out of granite and tired of nonsense since 1985, hitched up his belt and stepped onto the porch. You heard the lady, son, he rumbled. You got 30 minutes. Grab your toothbrush and your skivvies. Anything else stays put until the court's sorted out. 30 minutes? Caleb shrieked. I live here. My laptop, my clothes, your mother's things. I interrupted, stepping into his personal space. Which are now my things. You take what you bought, Caleb, which, if I recall correctly from the last 5 years of paying the bills, isn't much. Jessica let out a scoff. She looked at Caleb with pure disgust. The illusion of the wealthy tech entrepreneur had shattered, revealing the mooching mama's boy underneath. You're broke, she stated flatly. You made me pay for dinner last night because you forgot your wallet. You're actually broke. Jess, no, it's liquid assets. Lose my number, she said. She turned on her heel, marched down the stairs past me, and got into her convertible. She didn't look back. The rest of the guests followed suit. It was a mass exodus of fair-weather friends. Within 3 minutes, the driveway was empty except for the sheriff's cruiser, Samantha's Lexus, and the catering van packing up the unpaid-for appetizers. Inside, the sheriff ordered, pointing a thumb at the door. Clocks ticking. The next half hour was the most surreal experience of my life. I stood in the foyer I had scrubbed on my hands and knees 1,000 times, and watched Caleb run around like a rat in a maze. He grabbed a duffel bag and started shoving clothes into it. I followed him to the master bedroom, Dolores' room. He had already moved his stuff in there. He had slept in his dead mother's bed the night after she died. The level of disrespect was nausea-inducing. He reached for the jewelry box on the dresser. Ah, I said, leaning against the doorframe. Put it down. This is my inheritance, he spat, clutching the velvet box. Grandma's pearls, the diamond brooch, you can't have these. Read the will, Caleb, I said calmly. To Alana Vance, I leave the entirety of my estate. Jewelry is part of the estate. Put it down. He glared at me, his eyes wet with rage. For a second, I thought he might lunge at me. The sheriff must have thought so too, because he stepped into the doorway, his hand resting casually near his holster. Caleb dropped the box. It hit the dresser with a loud thud. You're a witch, he hissed. Just like her. You manipulated a sick old woman. You probably drugged her to get her to sign that. I kept her alive, I said, my voice low. While you were out with Jessica, while you were building your startup, while you were waiting for the check to clear. I cleaned her sores, Caleb. I held her hand when she cried for your father. You didn't even come to say goodbye. I was busy. You were indifferent, I corrected. And now you're homeless. 10 minutes left. He ran to the den, his office. He lunged for his high-end gaming PC. That, I said, pointing, was bought with Dolores' credit card 3 years ago. I remember because the bill came and she threw a vase at me. It stays. I need my work, he screamed, tearing his hair. My files! My crypto wallets are on here. Crypto, I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. Of course. Is that where the money went? The startup? You were gambling her pension on dog coins? His silence was the answer. You can take the hard drive, Samantha Steele said from the hallway, checking her nails. But the tower and the monitors stay. They are household assets. Caleb frantically unscrewed the side of the case, ripping the hard drive out with shaking hands. He threw it into his bag. He grabbed a stack of papers from the desk drawer, messy, crumpled envelopes. Let me see those, I said. They're my mail, he shouted, clutching them to his chest. Federal crime to open someone else's mail, Alana. Even you know that. Let him take the bills, Samantha advised. We don't want his debts. Fine, I said. Get out. Caleb zipped the bag. He looked around the house one last time. He looked at the crystal chandelier, the antique rug, the heavy oak staircase. He looked at the kingdom he thought he was owed. This isn't over, he said, pointing a finger at me. I'm going to contest this. I'm going to sue you for elder abuse. I'm going to drag your name through the mud until you can't get a job scrubbing toilets. You have $5,000, Caleb, I reminded him. Save it for a lawyer. You're going to need a good one. The sheriff escorted him out. I watched from the window as he threw his bag into the back of his leased BMW, which I knew was 2 payments behind because I had seen the notices. He peeled out of the driveway, gravel spraying, and disappeared down the road. The silence that followed was heavy, but it wasn't oppressive anymore. It was mine. Well, Samantha said, walking up behind me. That went well. The locks need to be changed. Immediately. I have a locksmith on speed dial. He'll be here in 20 minutes. Thank you, Samantha, I said, turning to her. Truly. Don't thank me yet, she said, her expression serious. We won the battle, but the war is just starting. He's desperate. And desperate men are dangerous. He's going to try to challenge the mental capacity of his mother. We need to secure everything. Every document, every pill bottle, every scrap of paper that proves she was lucid and that you were the primary caregiver. I have 5 years of logs, I said. I charted her vitals, her moods, her meals, every single day. It's all in the binders in the kitchen. Samantha grinned. Nurse's notes? Admissible evidence? Alana, you are a dream client. After the locksmith came and went, securing the house with deadbolts that felt like bank vault locks, Samantha left. I was alone. I walked through the house as the sun began to set, casting long orange shadows across the floorboards. For 5 years, I had walked these halls as a ghost, trying not to make noise, trying not to take up space. Now my footsteps echoed loudly. I went into the kitchen. I made myself a cup of tea in Dolores' favorite china cup, the one I wasn't allowed to touch. I sat at the head of the dining table. Here's to you, Dolores, I whispered, raising the cup to the empty room. You were a mean old bat, but you kept your word. But I couldn't rest. My adrenaline was still spiking. I kept thinking about the papers Caleb had clutched so tightly, the mail he refused to leave behind, and his mention of crypto. I went into the den. It smelled of stale energy drinks and Caleb's cologne. The desk was a mess. He had cleared out the drawers, but in his haste, he had missed things. Papers that had fallen behind the desk, a notebook tucked under the rug. I got down on my hands and knees and pulled the heavy mahogany desk away from the wall. There, wedged between the baseboard and the wood, was a red folder. I pulled it out. It wasn't Caleb's. It was Dolores's. But inside were papers that Caleb had clearly tried to hide from her and from me. I opened it. The first page was a second mortgage agreement, dated 2 years ago. My heart stopped. He had taken out a loan against the house? How? The title was in Dolores's name. I scanned the signature at the bottom, Dolores Halloway. But the handwriting, it was too smooth, too steady. Dolores had Parkinson's tremors so bad she couldn't hold a spoon without shaking. This signature was perfect. He had forged it. He had taken out a $200,000 line of credit against the house while his mother was dying in the next room. I flipped the page. Bank statements for an account I didn't recognize. The $200,000 had been deposited and then immediately transferred out in chunks. $10,000 to Coinbase, $50,000 to DraftKings, $20,000 to Elite Escorts, LLC. I covered my mouth. He hadn't just gambled on crypto. He had blown the money on sports betting and hookers. While I was changing his mother's diapers and eating ramen noodles to save money for our future, he was spending $50,000 on women. But the last document in the folder was the one that made my blood run cold. It wasn't a bank statement. It was a promissory note. A private loan agreement. Lender, Marcus the Hammer Vane. Borrower, Caleb Halloway. Amount, $150,000. Collateral, 424 Oak Lane. Interest, 20% weekly. It was dated 3 months ago. He had gone to a loan shark, a notorious one. I knew the name Vane. He ran the underground gambling rings in the city, and Caleb had put up the house, my house, as collateral. The math hit me like a physical blow. He owed the bank $200,000. He owed a loan shark $150,000 plus insane interest. And he had zero assets. Caleb wasn't just broke. He was a dead man walking. And by taking the house, I had just put myself directly in the line of fire. Bang, bang, bang. Someone was pounding on the front door. I jumped, spilling my tea. It was 9 p.m. It was dark. I crept into the hallway. Through the frosted glass, I could see a silhouette. It wasn't Caleb. It was too broad, too big. Caleb Halloway, a deep voice boomed. Open up. We know you're in there. It was the collectors. They didn't know he had been evicted. They just knew this was the address on the note. I stood frozen in the hallway. If I opened the door, they might hurt me just for being here. If I didn't, they might kick it in. I looked at the heavy new deadbolt. It held. He's not here. I shouted through the door, trying to sound braver than I felt. He doesn't live here anymore. Who is that? The voice grunted. The new owner, I yelled. The police evicted Caleb Holloway 4 hours ago. Check the police logs if you don't believe me. There was a silence on the porch, a muttered conversation. Tell him his clock ran out, the voice shouted back. Tell him Vane wants his money by midnight, or we take the collateral in pieces. I heard heavy boots walking away, then the roar of an engine. I slid down the wall until I hit the floor, clutching the red folder to my chest. I wasn't just fighting a bitter ex-boyfriend anymore. I was sitting on a property that was claimed by a bank and a mobster. The fortune Dolores had left me was actually a war zone. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from an unknown number. You think you won? You just inherited my debt. Have fun with Vane. I'm halfway to Mexico. See, he knew. He knew exactly what he was doing. He didn't just leave me the house. He left me the bomb he had planted inside it. I stared at the phone. He was running. He was going to let me take the fall for his fraud and his gambling debts. He thought I would crumble. He thought I would be so terrified I would sell the house for pennies just to escape, or that Vane would scare me off. I stood up. I walked to the kitchen and grabbed the heavy cast iron skillet from the drying rack. I walked to the front door and double-checked the lock. Mexico, I whispered. You think you can run to Mexico? I pulled up Samantha Steele's number. Samantha, I said when she answered. Don't go to sleep. We have a new problem, but I also have a solution. What kind of solution? She asked groggily. I know where the money went, I said. And I know who he owes. But more importantly, I know that fraud negates a contract. If I can prove he forged Dolores' signature on the mortgage and the loan shark note, the debts don't attach to the house. They attach to him. That's true, Samantha said, waking up. But proving it to a loan shark is tricky. I don't need to prove it to the shark, I said, a dangerous plan forming in my mind. I just need to tell the shark where to find the man who actually has his money. Alana, what are you doing? I'm tracking a flight, I said, opening my laptop. I still had Caleb's passwords. He was lazy. He used the same password for everything, including his Uber account and his travel apps. I logged into his airline account. There it was. A one-way ticket to Cancun, departing at 6 a.m. tomorrow from O'Hare. He's at the airport, I said, or he will be. So, I said. I'm not going to call the police. The police take too long. I looked at the promissory note again. There was a phone number scribbled at the bottom. For payments, call 555-0199. I'm going to make a call, I said. Alana, no, Samantha warned. Do not call a hitman. I'm not calling a hitman, I said, my voice cold. I'm calling a creditor. I'm just a helpful citizen updating a billing address. I hung up the phone. I looked at the number. I had nursed his mother. I had cleaned his house. I had protected his secrets. And now I was going to serve him up on a silver platter to the wolves he had invited to dinner. I dialed the number. Yeah? A voice answered. It was the same voice from the porch. This is the woman from the house, I said. You're looking for Caleb. We're listening. He's at O'Hare International, I said. Terminal 3, American Airlines, Flight 492 to Cancun. He's carrying a duffel bag with a stolen hard drive and about $5,000 in cash. He leaves in 6 hours. There was a pause, then a low, dark chuckle. Thanks, lady. We'll see him off. Click. I put the phone down. I sat in the dark house, listening to the wind rattle the windows. I didn't feel guilty. I felt efficient. The house was mine. The debts were his. And the bill was finally, truly coming due. I sat in the dark living room, the phone screen glowing in my hand, listening to the silence of the house I had just fought a war to keep. I had nursed his sick mom for 5 years, and he left me the day she died, expecting me to fade into the background like a ghost. But he forgot that ghosts are the ones who do the haunting. I had just tipped off a loan sharks enforcement team about Caleb's flight to Mexico, essentially signing a warrant for his capture that didn't require a judge. It was ruthless, yes. But as I stared at the forged mortgage papers that threatened to take the roof over my head, I realized that ruthless was just another word for survival. If you're ready to see exactly what happens when a man tries to outrun his karma, hit that subscribe button and like this video. We are approaching the endgame, and trust me, you don't want to blink. The night passed in a vigil. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I spent the hours between midnight and dawn going through every single piece of paper in that red folder. I organized the evidence of the forgery, the dates on the loan documents, the corresponding dates in my nursing logs where Dolores was incoherent or physically incapacitated. I built a timeline of fraud so tight that not even Houdini could escape it. At 7 a.m., the sun bled through the heavy velvet curtains. My phone buzzed. It wasn't Caleb. It was Samantha Steele. "Turn on the news," she said. Her voice was crisp, awake, and sounded like victory. "Channel 5. I grabbed the remote and clicked on the TV. The morning anchor was looking serious. An image of O'Hare International Airport flashed on the screen, followed by a shaky cell phone video taken by a bystander in the terminal. In the video, airport security and police were swarming a man near the check-in counter. He was on the ground, curled into a ball, screaming for help. But it wasn't the police he was screaming about. "They're going to kill me," the man in the video shrieked, a voice I knew better than my own. "Arrest me, please, just take me to jail. Don't let them take me." The camera zoomed in. It was Caleb. He looked deranged. His shirt was ripped, his lip was bloody, and he was clutching a police officer's leg like a toddler. The anchor's voiceover cut in. "Drama at O'Hare this morning. As a local man, Caleb Holloway was taken into custody after causing a scene at the American Airlines counter. Witnesses say Holloway appeared to be fleeing an altercation in the parking garage and begged police for protection. He has been detained on outstanding warrants related to fraud and embezzlement filed just yesterday." I lowered the remote. The altercation in the parking garage. Vane's men had found him. They had delivered the message. Caleb, terrified of what the loan shark would do to him in a dark alley, had chosen the safety of a jail cell. "He's in custody," Samantha said in my ear. "And he's singing like a canary. He's admitting to everything. The forged will, the stolen identity, the loans. He's trying to cut a deal for protective custody because he's terrified of the streets." "Good," I said, a wave of relief washing over me so powerful my knees buckled. "Does that mean the house is safe?" "It means we have leverage," Samantha corrected. "The bank isn't going to just walk away because he confessed. They still want their $200,000. We have a meeting with the branch manager at 9 a.m. Wear the black dress again. We need to look like the people who own the building, not the people begging for a loan." I showered, dressed, and drank 3 cups of black coffee. I felt sharp, dangerous. We met at the downtown branch of Chase Bank. The manager, a Mr. Henderson, looked like he had swallowed a lemon when we walked in. He had the red folder on his desk, or at least the bank's copy of the mortgage. "Miss Vance," he said, not standing up to shake my hand. "Miss Steele, while we appreciate Mr. Holloway's legal troubles, the fact remains that a lien exists on the property. We have a signed contract." "You have a forgery," Samantha said, sitting down and crossing her legs. "And a sloppy one at that." "The signature was notarized," Henderson argued, tapping the paper, "by a Mr. Gary Sinise. Gary Sinise is Caleb's college roommate," I spoke up, sliding a photo across the desk. It was a printout from Caleb's Facebook. "Caleb and Gary doing keg stands at a tailgate party 3 years ago. He's an uncertified notary who lost his license 6 months ago for fraud. I checked the state database this morning." Henderson blinked. He picked up the photo. "And this," I continued, slamming a thick binder onto his mahogany desk, "is the medical log for the day the loan was signed. October 12th, 2 years ago." I flipped the binder open. On October 12th, Dolores Holloway was suffering from severe dystonia, muscle spasms. She couldn't hold a spoon, let alone a pen. I administered 5 milligrams of diazepam at 9 a.m. and again at 2 p.m. She was asleep or hallucinating for the entire business day. "Look at the signature on your contract, Mr. Henderson. It's smooth, flowing. It's the signature of a healthy man practicing calligraphy. It is not the signature of a dying woman with Parkinson's." Henderson looked at the log. He looked at the contract. He looked at me. "If you try to foreclose on this house," Samantha added, her voice dropping to a terrifying whisper, "we will sue this bank for predatory lending, failure to perform due diligence, and aiding and abetting elder financial abuse. And we will call the press. Bank evicts nurse who cared for victim of fraud." How does that headline sound for your quarterly review? Henderson paled. He closed the folder. I will forward this to our fraud department," he stammered. If the police report corroborates Mr. Holloway's confession, we will likely discharge the debt as fraudulent. Likely isn't good enough, I said. I want a letter stating the foreclosure is halted immediately pending investigation. He typed for a moment, the printer whirred, and he handed me a sheet of paper. We're done here, I said, taking it. We walked out into the sunshine. The bank was handled, the mob was satisfied. Since Caleb was in jail, he was off the board for now. The house was truly mine. But I wasn't done. I needed closure. Take me to the precinct, I told Samantha. You don't have to do that, she said gently. He's done, Alana. He's ruined. I need him to see me, I said. I need him to know that I didn't just survive. I won. Samantha drove me to the county jail. Because she was his lawyer's opposing counsel on the probate case, she pulled some strings to get me a visitation slot. I sat in the sterile room, separated by thick plexiglass. The smell of industrial cleaner reminded me of the hospital, of the life I had before I met him. The door on the other side buzzed open. A guard led Caleb in. He looked awful. His eye was swollen shut, his lips split. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. He sat down, the chains rattling. When he saw me, he didn't look angry. He looked broken. Alana, he croaked into the phone receiver. I picked up my side. Hello, Caleb. You did this, he whispered. You called Vane. His guys, they were waiting by my car. They took the cash. They took the laptop. They told me if I left the country, they'd find me and cut off my fingers. You borrowed the money, Caleb, I said, my voice steady. You gambled it away. Did you think I was going to pay it for you? I could have paid it back, he pleaded. If I had the house, if I could have sold it, why did you have to be so vicious? Vicious? I laughed. It was a genuine laugh of disbelief. Caleb, I wiped your mother's bottom for 5 years. I cooked your meals. I cleaned your house. I loved you. And the day she died, you threw $5,000 at me and told me to get out. You treated me like a disposable object. You didn't just break my heart, you tried to erase my existence. He looked down at the metal table. I messed up, okay? I messed up. But this? Vane? It's too much, Alana. I'm scared. Can't you drop the lawsuit? If you drop the probate case, maybe the DA will go easy on the fraud charges. Please, I'll sign the house over. Just help me. I looked at him. This man I had once thought was my soulmate. I searched for any spark of pity in my heart. I looked for the nurse who wanted to heal everyone. I couldn't find her. She died in that house along with Dolores. The house is already mine, I said. The bank just confirmed it. And the probate case isn't about the house anymore. It's about justice for Dolores. She hated you, he snapped, a flash of his old arrogance returning. She trusted me, I corrected. Which is more than she ever did for you. I stood up. I'm not dropping the charges, Caleb. I'm going to testify. I'm going to tell the jury about every forged check, every fake signature, every night you spent with Jessica while your mother was crying in pain. You wanted a life of leisure? You've got it. 3 meals a day, a roof over your head, and no responsibilities. It's exactly what you wanted. Alana, wait, he yelled as I hung up the phone. Don't leave me here. I have nothing. You have exactly what you earned, I said through the glass. I turned and walked out. I didn't look back. I walked out of the jail and into the fresh air. Samantha was waiting by the car. You okay? She asked. I'm better than okay, I said. I'm free. We drove back to the house. It was late afternoon. The house was quiet. I walked through the rooms, reclaiming them one by one. I opened the windows to let the breeze in, chasing out the smell of stale medicine and Caleb's cologne. I went into Dolores's room. I stripped the bed Caleb had defiled with his indifference. I gathered all the sheets and threw them in the trash. I would buy new ones. Silk ones. I sat down at her vanity table. It was cluttered with old perfume bottles and pill organizers. I started to clear them away, wiping down the dust. As I moved a heavy crystal jewelry box, the one Caleb had tried to steal, I noticed something. The felt lining in the bottom of the drawer was loose. I frowned. I ran my fingernail along the edge and peeled it back. Underneath the felt was a false bottom, and nestled in the velvet hollow was a small, silver key and a folded piece of paper. My heart skipped a beat. Another secret? Hadn't we had enough? I unfolded the paper. It was Dolores's handwriting again, but this time it was stronger, clearer. It must have been written years ago before the tremors took her hands. Alana, If you are reading this, it means you beat him. I knew you would. You have a spine, even if you hide it under those scrubs. Caleb thinks the house is the fortune. He's a fool. He never looked past the surface. He never knew about the patent. My husband, Robert, didn't just leave me a pension. He was an inventor. He held the patent for a specific valve used in hydraulic pumps. The royalties have been accumulating in a blind trust for 30 years. I never touched it. I wanted to see if Caleb would make something of himself first. He didn't. The key opens safety deposit box 404 at the First National Bank. Inside are the deed to the trust and the accumulation of 3 decades of royalties. It's not $1 million, Alana. It's 12. Don't spend it all on shoes, or do. I don't care. Just make sure he never sees a dime. D, I stared at the note. The paper shook in my hands. $12 million. I looked at the silver key. It caught the light of the setting sun, gleaming like a star. Caleb had fought for the house. He had forged wills for a Victorian money pit that needed a new roof. He had ruined his life for a pile of bricks. And all the while, the real empire was sitting under a piece of felt in the room he refused to enter. I laughed. It started as a giggle, bubbling up from my chest, and then turned into a full-throated, joyous sound that filled the empty house. I wasn't just a survivor. I wasn't just a homeowner. I was the CEO of my own destiny. I picked up the key. I picked up the phone. "Samantha," I said when she answered, "don't close the file yet." "What is it now?" she laughed. "Did you find a body in the basement?" "Better," I said, looking out the window at the overgrown garden I was going to turn into a paradise. "I found the retirement fund." The bank vault at First National was quiet, a hushed cathedral of steel and silence that smelled of dust and old money. It was a stark contrast to the chaotic, urine-scented hallways of the nursing home where I had spent half my career, or the dusty, medicine-cluttered bedroom where I had wasted 5 years of my life. Samantha Steele stood beside me, her usually sharp demeanor softened by a rare look of genuine awe. I held the silver key Dolores had left me, the key Caleb had walked past 1,000 times while pacing the floor, complaining about being broke. My hand didn't shake. I felt a strange, cold calm. I slid the key into box 404. It turned with a satisfying click, a sound that felt like a lock snapping shut on my past. The box was long and heavy. We carried it to a private viewing room. I lifted the lid. There were no stacks of cash, no gold bars, just a thick sheaf of legal documents bound in blue paper and a single leather-bound ledger. I opened the ledger. It was a record of deposits, royalties, every quarter for 30 years. The numbers started small, a few thousand here, a few thousand there. But as the hydraulic valve technology became industry standard, the numbers grew and grew. The final entry, dated 2 weeks before Dolores died, showed a balance in the blind trust that made Samantha let out a low whistle. $12,400,000 in change. "He never knew," Samantha whispered, flipping through the trust deed. "It's ironclad, Alana. Robert Halloway set this up perfectly. It bypasses probate entirely. It goes to the holder of the key and the passphrase. It's yours, tax paid and liquid." I ran my hand over the paper. I thought of Caleb screaming about his crypto wallet. I thought of him selling his mother's car for scraps. I thought of him cheating on me to get a free dinner from Jessica. He had lived in a house built on a gold mine, and he had starved because he was too arrogant to dig. "He can never know," Samantha said, looking at me. "If he finds out, he'll spend the next 20 years filing nuisance lawsuits from prison." I closed the box. "No," I said, a slow smile spreading across my face. "He needs to know, but not yet. I want him to know exactly when he can't do a damn thing about it." The next 6 months were a blur of reconstruction. I didn't just renovate the house, I exorcised it. I tore down the heavy velvet curtains and replaced them with light, airy linen. I ripped up the carpets that smelled of sickness and laid down warm, honey-colored hardwood. I turned Dolores's gloomy bedroom into a guest suite, and I turned the nurse's room, my old cell, into a walk-in closet filled with clothes that weren't scrubs. I bought a car, a sleek white Range Rover that felt like driving a tank wrapped in leather. But the real work was the trial. Caleb didn't get a plea deal. The sheer volume of fraud, combined with the predation on an elderly woman, made him a pariah. I sat in the front row every single day, wearing my best suits, staring him down. He looked small, defeated. He tried to catch my eye, tried to mouth, "I'm sorry," but I looked through him like he was a pane of glass. The testimony was damning. I laid out the logs. I showed the jury the timeline of his business trips versus his mother's medical emergencies. The bank manager testified about the forged loan. Vane's enforcers didn't testify. They vanished into the ether. But the footage of Caleb at the airport was enough to prove flight risk and consciousness of guilt. The jury took 2 hours, guilty on all counts: fraud, forgery, elder abuse, embezzlement. The sentencing hearing was the final act. The judge, a stern woman who clearly had no patience for men who preyed on their mothers, gave him 15 years. As the bailiffs moved to cuff him, Caleb turned to the gallery. He looked at me. "Alana," he shouted, desperate. "The house! Keep the house! Just put some money on my books! Please, I have nothing." I stood up. I walked to the railing. I reached into my purse and pulled out a single piece of paper. It wasn't a check. It was a photocopy of the balance sheet from the blind trust. I handed it to his lawyer, who looked confused. "Give this to your client," I said loud enough for the court to hear. "Tell him it's a gift from his mother." Caleb grabbed the paper. He looked at the numbers. He looked at the date. He looked at the name of the trust. His face went slack. His knees gave out, and the bailiffs actually had to hold him up. 12 million? He wheezed, the air leaving his body. She had 12 million? She did, I said, smiling, and she left it to the nurse. A guttural scream of pure, agonizing regret tore from his throat. It was the sound of a man whose soul had just been crushed by the weight of his own stupidity. He was screaming as they dragged him out the side door, his wails echoing in the courtroom long after he was gone. I walked out of the courthouse and into the sunlight. Samantha was waiting for me on the steps, 2 coffees in hand. "That was cold," she said, grinning. "I loved it." "It was necessary," I said, taking the coffee. "Closure." "So," Samantha said, looking out at the city skyline. "You're rich, you're free, you're young. What now? Paris, Fiji, a toy boy named Luca?" I looked at the city. I thought about the luxury. I thought about the easy life Caleb had wanted, and I realized I didn't want it. Not like that. I was a nurse. I was a caregiver. That wasn't just a job. It was who I was. But I was done being a servant. "I'm not going to Paris," I said. "I'm going back to work." Samantha choked on her latte. "Work, Alana? You have buy a private island money. Why would you empty bedpans?" "I'm not going to empty bedpans," I said, turning to her. "I'm going to balance the scales." I told her my idea. 1 month later, we cut the ribbon on the Halloway Trust. We bought an office building downtown, paid in cash. It wasn't a medical clinic. It was a sanctuary and a sword. The mission was simple. We provided legal, financial, and logistical support to caregivers who were being exploited. I hired nurses who were burnt out. I hired forensic accountants who were bored with corporate audits. And I kept Samantha on as legal counsel on a retainer that made her question why she ever worked for anyone else. We became the people you called when the family tried to steal Grandma's pension. We were the people you called when a live-in nurse was being held hostage by financial coercion. We didn't just provide care. We investigated. We audited. And if we found fraud, we struck with the precision of a surgeon and the brutality of a loan shark. I remember our first big case. A woman named Maria came to us. She had been caring for her uncle for 10 years. His children, who hadn't visited in a decade, showed up the week he went into hospice and tried to kick her out and seize the house. I sat across from Maria in my office. She looked exactly like I had looked. Tired, scared, wearing scrubs that had seen too many shifts. "They say I have no rights," she whispered, twisting her hands. "They say I was just a squatter, but I promised him I'd stay." I spun my laptop around. On the screen was a dossier my team had compiled in 48 hours. "We found the uncle's original handwritten will in a Bible he gave you," I said. "We also found evidence that his son has been siphoning money from his Social Security account for 3 years. That's a federal crime, Maria." Her eyes went wide. "Samantha is drafting the injunction right now," I continued, leaning forward. "And I've already set up a trust in your name to handle the legal fees. You aren't going anywhere, but they are going to jail." Maria started to cry. "Why? Why are you doing this?" "Because someone did it for me," I said, handing her a tissue. "Now dry your eyes. We have a meeting with the Sharks at noon, and I need you to look dangerous." That was 3 years ago. Today, the Holloway Trust is a force of nature in the city. We've recovered millions in stolen assets. We've put away 3 crooked guardians and 1 very corrupt probate lawyer. I don't wear scrubs anymore. I wear tailored suits and 6-inch heels. But when I walk into a room, people still know I'm a nurse. They know I'm there to fix the problem, and if the problem is a person, I will excise them like a tumor. I still live in the house on Oak Lane. It's beautiful now. The garden is in full bloom, but I didn't keep it as a shrine. I use it. Every Thursday night, I host a dinner for my staff and our clients. We eat, we laugh, and we share stories of the battles we've won. Tonight, the house is quiet. I'm sitting on the porch watching the fireflies dance in the twilight. My phone buzzes on the table next to a glass of vintage red wine, Dolores' favorite year. It's a text from Samantha, new case, high profile. A billionaire in Lake Forest has a live-in companion who hasn't been seen in months. The family says she's on vacation. Our source says she's locked in the guest wing without a passport. They have armed security. I look at the message. A billionaire. Armed security. A woman trapped in a gilded cage. Most people would see danger. They would see a risk not worth taking. They would sip their wine and go to bed on their high thread count sheets. I pick up the phone. I type back, get the car, and bring the bolt cutters. I stand up, smoothing down my dress. I take a sip of the wine, tasting the oak and the victory. Caleb is rotting in a cell, thinking about the millions he lost. Dolores is resting in peace, knowing her legacy is a weapon. And me? I'm just getting started. The shift never really ends. It just gets a hell of a lot more interesting. Let's go to work, I whispered to the night. I walk down the steps, my heels clicking on the pavement, ready for the next patient, the next fight, and the next win. The nurse is in,